Good afternoon. I'm just letting everybody in. Thank you for joining us today. Excited for our third part of this webinar series with Dr. Lynn Johnson. And today she's going to be looking at recovery. What happens post-COVID-19? What are our policies? What are our best practices? You know, what does that recovery look like? What are the types of things that we should be looking for, and so on and so forth. So as I keep letting people in here, again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to hand straight to Dr. Lynn Johnson, and then she can take the program over from here. Dr. Johnson, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. For the next 30 minutes, we will be diving into some information about this recovery post-COVID, what types of policies or best practices that we could use during this process. I am very thankful to Amanda for allowing me to put on this kind of mini series to go over a few things that I feel is very important to business owners and to leaders as yourself, to be able to kind of navigate through these unforeseen circumstances that we are all in. And I'm excited to be with you today. And just to kind of give you a little background about myself, I own and operate Triumphant HR Solutions. I am an HR outsourcing and consulting firm who primarily works with small business owners to help lighten their HR load. Any issues that they may have, they can reach out to me, from all the way from strategy to the simple day-to-day HR activities that go on in the office. I believe that HR, and some of you that have been on the call with me for the last few weeks, know that I believe that HR is the heart of the organization, and it's all about the people. And if we take care of our people will take care of us, and that impacts our bottom line. And so thank you for taking the time out today out of your busy schedule to just listen in for the next 25 minutes or so. So we're just going to jump right on in. So I kind of toyed around with what should I talk about today. As I was telling Amanda right before everyone logged in, is that we've been so inundated with so many things when it comes to COVID. You know, there's so much information at our fingertips. And when we talk about reopening and returning to work, there's so much research out there. And I didn't want to kind of bore you with some of the stuff that you may have already seen or have already been on some other webinars or calls. So I kind of wanted to take a different approach, because I do understand that we are in some unprecedented times right now. Our communities, our families, our employees, and even our own businesses as a whole, we've all been impacted by this COVID-19 pandemic, right? So when we think about the decisions that we have to make and the processes that we have to implement when we are returning to the workplace, and I'm still seeing some of you guys are still in your home offices, some of you haven't returned back to work, but we do know that some others have returned back to work, but we're still kind of in this process, right, of figuring out, okay, what are we going to do, or is what we are currently doing actually working for us? But all of it's complex, and all of it covers a whole lot of different aspects that we all have to consider. And, you know, this begins with, how do we open up in a manner that is safe, but it also ensures this business continuity, right? Does it serve the purpose of keeping our business stabilized, you know? And so when we're opening these closed facilities or our office buildings, following all of this pandemic stuff, it really, really requires a lot of planning. It requires us to really think on a deeper level. So today we're going to go over some key considerations and some best practices on how to go from, as your screen says, from response to recovery. A lot of us, I mean, just think about it. We have been in the response mode. How do we respond to COVID-19? But it's been a few months now, right? But we really have to start thinking about how are we actually going to recover in this new normal, right? How are we going to recover in this new normal? And so I did some research and I found this quote that says the historic challenge for leaders is to manage the crisis while building the future. Okay, uh, Henry Kissinger came up with this quote, so I can't take the credit. But I also got this information from a great article that I read, and I felt that it was essential for us to really dig deep into how do we shift from actually response mode to recovery mode. And there was this article that's written by, and I'm sure I'm not going to say his name right, but I believe it's Punit Rinjan, and it's spelled, for those of you that might want to write it down, it's PUNITRENJEN, and he's with Liability consulting firm, and he wrote an article that I felt was so profound for business owners as well as business leaders who are actually leading these different organizations, of how we can change our way of thinking during this recovery process. And he makes some great points in this article. He actually indicates that many leaders in the early stages of COVID-19, think back to March. Think back to early March, late March, early April. What was your mindset back then, right? What was your mindset in the early days? We could say that, just like Mr. Ringen pointed out, that all of the days started kind of just blending together. How true is that for everyone, that during that time we were all scrambling, trying to figure out what to do next? How do we handle this crisis that we're in? But I wanted to quote something out of his article that stood out the most to me, and he says that resilient leaders need to shift the mindset of their teams from today to tomorrow. And this involves several changes that have important implications to the path of recovery. I love how he stated that. We have to shift our mindsets, right, to not just looking at today, but to also look at tomorrow. And he has this great diagram that I put up here on the screen for you guys to see. Okay, how do we shift the mindset, right, from responding to the recovery stage? And I'm just going to go over it real quickly, but I gave you his name. There's tons of more information that he has, but let's talk about a few of the issues that he thinks that, hey, this is how we need to shift our mindset when we're looking at this COVID situation. He says we need to shift from responding to the unpredictability of the things that we're going through to that recovery mindset, to looking at the normal, right? This interim normal, or the new normal that we've been really talking about. And what he means here is, think about things with the destination in mind, right? Think about or envision the destination at the end of the recovery phase. Because if you think about the end, you can plan for that end to look like what you want it to look like, right? And then he talks about our focus as business owners and as leaders to not just have that inward looking. Well, what's inward looking? Well, that's looking at just your internal pieces, right? Your employee safety, your operational continuity. He says, hey, while that's all fine and good, and we need to do that too, but we need to start embracing the market facing posture that we need to be. And what does this really mean? It means taking all stakeholders into account when we are in this recovery phase. It's not just about the people that work for us. It's not just about just the people that we deal with, but what about our customers? What about the people that invest in our companies? We have to think about them too. And from the management perspective, I really love this. He says we have to we have to change our mindset from crisis management to now program management. And when I read this, I was like, oh my goodness, this is very important, especially to a lot of managers that are probably on the line today, because we have been managing the crisis. That is what we've been doing, right? Managing the crisis. But he says, even while you're managing the crisis, manage the transition back to a restored future. Transition back to a restored future, because we have to look to the future, to tomorrow. What does tomorrow look like, right? And this may mean that people's roles are changing. This may mean that what we talked about last week, that I know the company that my daughter works for, they told her last week that they may not ever go back to her role being in the office. We have to come to grips with that new normal and not be afraid of it, you know? So, and then another thing is planning. We all plan, we hope that we plan well, but we have to transition from contingency planning to scenario planning. The what if this is going to happen? Because in our businesses, it's not just about the safety of our employees, even though that's a number one concern, but it's about our operations. It's about our finances. There are so many things that we have to take into account in order for our businesses to stabilize during this time and to be able to be profitable in the future post-COVID. Right? Once it all goes back to the way that we think, or if it will go back to the way that we think it will be, we don't know, right? And lastly, the attitude from being reactive to being reinventive, right? To reinvent. Guys, I thought that this whole mindset shift that he came up with was profound for business owners like yourselves, for leaders like yourselves. We have to have an attitude to where we're looking toward the future and we are embracing what the world throws at us, and we are not trying to dodge what the world throws at us. There are so many companies that have taken this opportunity to reinvent themselves. Could you imagine Silicon Valley, companies like Google, who have had to shift to at-home work? Well, a lot of what Google offers their employees is on their property, right? It's all of the things and the benefits that they offer them, but they even see that, hey, we have to change during this time, but we can still do it in a way that helps us as companies, right? So let's now look at how do we actually have a successful recovery. Now, I put together just a few things that I thought would be a way for us to kind of put some things into perspective of how we can be successful during this recovery phase. And I want to start off by talking about Walmart, because the first thing I want us to do is to avoid liability pitfalls, okay? And I hope there's no Walmart. If there are any Walmart employees on the line, don't take this personal. Has nothing to do with you as a person. But we have to look at Walmart and learn what not to do, right? Because currently, right now, Walmart is being sued by a family of an Illinois employee who died after contracting COVID-19. And his family is alleging that Walmart basically didn't do enough to protect its workers, right? And just recently, 3 weeks ago, an employee at a distribution center filed a complaint with OSHA because 60 people tested positive at one of their distribution centers. 60 people tested positive for the virus. Now, it's essential for us to avoid these liability pitfalls that I believe that Walmart fell into. And I found this in an article when I was researching the case, and because it listed what the family felt that Walmart failed to do. And the reason why I put it here today is because I want you to think about these things and think about what's going on in your own business. Because Walmart is allegedly told that they failed to clean and sterilize their store properly. It alleges that they failed to promote and enforce social distancing guidelines. You would think that we would know how to do that by now, right? They failed to provide the PPE equipment to their employees. They failed to address, or they allegedly failed to address health concerns of employees that had the symptoms, and they didn't warn other workers. And then it says that they allegedly failed to shut down the locations in order to clean. That's why the OSHA complaint was filed, because after 60 people had contracted COVID-19, they did not shut down the distribution center. They did not shut it down to clean properly and then invite employees back to work. So we have to keep these things in mind, because we do not want to fall in these same pitfalls. Another thing is we must rely on guidance. We have to rely on what has been provided to us, right? We have to make sure that we understand the federal, the state, and the local orders, the different directives, and the different guidelines that has been given to us. People have taken time. The experts have taken time to put this information together for us, and we need to rely on it as business owners. We can't second step this. We have to rely on the information that's been provided to us. For the CDC, they help us to avoid they help us to determine how we can avoid and how we can minimize the spread of the virus. OSHA helps us to achieve a safe work environment. HIPAA helps us keep our employees protected, because if you do have somebody who might have come into exposure with the COVID virus, you want to be able to say, hey, this is what has happened, but that you're also understanding that we have to protect people's personal information. And if you need to know how to do it correctly. So we need to rely on this guidance. There are also some industry guidelines, which I think is very important for businesses, because there are some, for example, if you have a restaurant, there are associations out there that are actually publishing guidance for specific industries: the trucking industry, the transportation industry, the restaurant industry. So there are some guidance out there for you. I put a website here. It's called onupkeep.com, and this is a website where it has a collection of industry specific checklists and industry specific resources that cover the reopening of different businesses within these specific types of industries. So it's something very important to go and check out if you get an opportunity to. And of course, the EEOC. We in HR, we know how important the EEOC is and their guidelines that they have put out there. There is information out there as far as temperature taking, as far as what you can and cannot do when it comes to someone who may be experiencing symptoms, and you want to know how to do it properly. I know some of us are small businesses, and you may not have a whole lot of employees, but you still need to know. You still need to go on, learn what you can and what you cannot do to keep you out of those liability pitfalls that we already talked about. Even in my first video that we did for the series, talked a lot about the different liability issues that we can come into contact with. But the EEOC, it breaks it down. It says that you can measure an employee's body temperature. You can tell somebody that, hey, if they're experiencing symptoms, that they need to go home. It's okay to tell them that. The EEOC says that you can. You just need to make sure that you're doing it in a proper manner and that you still keep that employee-employer relationship very solid and concrete. Believe me, your employees will thank you for it, right? They will definitely thank you for it. So you might say, well, okay, Lynn has kind of gone over this guidance and why it's important. We have to understand that so far there is no set standard of care. Let's be honest. We have so much information from so many different sources, but we have to understand that there is guidance out there that we should be following. So, but if you were to get like a negligent claim or a wrongful death claim, if you are following the guidance that has been provided to you, you can say that, hey, I have followed all of the guidance that has been provided to me, and that I'm using other sources that I'm not the one that's coming up with. It's sources from the CDC, it's from OSHA, it's from HIPAA, it's from these people, the experts that say I should do this, and this is what I did, and I can show you how I implemented what the CDC guidelines stated. It's important because you want to make sure that you have a legal defense going down the road, because it is always a possibility that somebody could make a claim against you, and it's you as a business owner, it's you as the leader to prove that you did not do what they say that you're doing. The burden of proof is on you. And when you can go back and say, well, I followed this guideline and I follow that guideline, then at least that's a big help. Now, keep in mind that anything that I'm sharing with you today is not to be considered legal advice. I am not an attorney. Okay, so my next thing to tell you is go get you some legal advice, right? Get you some legal advice if you need help creating your business reopening strategy, or even to help you with the strategy that you're kind of already in, but you might think that it needs another close look, somebody that's can help you be compliant with the law, to make you, or to help ensure that your business is not being exposed to liability. It's okay to go out there. There are business lawyers out there. There are employment lawyers out there that can help guide you through these unprecedented times that we are in. And I am sure that Amanda has some people that she can recommend to you to reach out to, because for one thing, you know, especially with small business owners, well, like I just can't afford it. Well, you really don't want to afford it if something were to happen. So you have to make the decision what's best for your company and the continuity of your business, right? To keeping that business going. So you want to make sure that you do that. So let's look at some best practices that I came up with. Again, there's so much information at our fingertips. Like I said earlier, these are just some things that I felt would be a good starting point for some of us, but there is so much information out there for you to go out and do your own research yourself. But first, always implement smart business practices. And why did Lynn say smart? Because it has to be. They have to be smart because they have to take into consideration your business, but it also has to take into consideration your employee, and it has to take into consideration your customer, right? And your investors. So these are smart business practices that you can implement. For instance, modifying your workspaces, minimizing business travel, continuing remote work if you have to do so, having medical plans in place to where if an employee has symptoms and they need to return back to work, that you have policies in place to help with getting them back to work, requiring a doctor's note and a clean bill of health before they can come back. So implement some best business practices. Make sure that you have flexible leave, sick leave policies too. This will help tremendously out there. Of course, always assess your current business continuity plan. When I think about continuity plans and I think about just business continuity and what it means, and it's about maintaining our business activities at an acceptable level in case a significant business disruption happens. And we can all attest that COVID-19 was a significant business disruption, right? A very big, significant business disruption. So as employers, we have to make sure that we focus on how to protect our employees, how to service our customers, but also how to stabilize our business. So we have to look at our current business continuity plans, but also take time to learn valuable lessons from what has worked and what has not worked so that you can update these continuity plans. Also, update or issue new policies and or handbooks. I know that question comes up a lot. I know Amanda has asked me several times about policies and procedures and handbooks. It's very important that you maintain updated policies, especially now. You know, if you have not done a thorough review of your handbook in the last 2 to 3 years, this is the time. This is the time to update and reissue your handbook to employees who are returning, reissue your handbook to employees who haven't stopped working. It is imperative because nobody saw COVID-19 coming. We haven't had a pandemic since what, 1918, I think it was. We didn't even expect it to come. So if anything, you need to be updating your policies and your handbooks to add things that you've learned during this pandemic, okay? So make sure that you do that. Train and educate. We have to make sure that we are training and that we are educating our people. A lot of companies have done some online training where employees have to actually go through some training protocols of new safety procedures before they even come back to work. So that's something that I think would really help businesses, even small businesses. And monitor and prepare. Monitor your people, prepare if somebody gets sick. You need to be able to do that. Check signs and symptoms, establish any sickness protocols, all of those things that I've kind of already said. And then the last one is closing the workplace. As everything regarding this pandemic, as you have workplace closures can change at the drop of a dime. We don't know, right? They can have us go back on another lockdown. We have to be ready for that. You have to be ready for that. So always keep that in mind, that you have a procedure if it happens again. Make sure that you do that. Now, I've said so much, and I know that I only have maybe 1 minute left, but there is so much that I could have said. But I do hope that you take something away from what I said today so that you can utilize it in your business and with your team. So I appreciate you taking the time out to listen to me today. I really appreciate it. There's more I could say, but time is out. Thank you, Amanda, again.
You are very welcome. Lynn, would you put that thank you? I was going to say, I know that we've had lots of comments in there. I've had comments back saying how useful this was, and it is extremely important that, and I know we're going to continue this discussion next Monday in the final episode in our webinar series with Dr. Johnson. But, you know, as she keeps stressing, I can't tell you how important it is that we have our policies and procedures updated and in place so that we are implementing these procedures uniformly across all of our workforce, because that's where businesses get tripped up, is when something's being done for one employee but not being done for the other. That's where lawsuits happen, people. So if you need help, I know that reviewing our policies and procedures is always the last thing everybody wants to do because we just don't have the time. That's exactly why we employ our professionals like Dr. Johnson, who can come in and help you with that. So please do work with a HR professional on doing that to make sure that you're compliant with everything that you need to do. Protect yourselves. It's about recovery, and I love, once again, I've taken oodles of notes. I'm going to go check out the website, onupkeep.com. I love that idea, and I've totally stolen some of those quotes, Lynn, so thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us this lunchtime. It's really great. I love that I'm learning something every single week. So Thank you to Dr. Johnson. Thank you for all for joining us. I hope
Thank
that
you.
you will join us on Thursday evening for a networking showcase. We're having a lot of fun with discussion points on that too, or Friday morning for coffee and conversation when we get to hear updates from our city and our chamber and our state. So again, thank you all for joining us. Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday with Dr. Johnson. Thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Have a great week.